giving primary education, and with 374,674 learners, with pupil to teacher ratio of 29 learners to one teacher, and a pupil classroom ratio of 20 learners in one. These are nursery schools, and pupil stance ratio of 23 children to one. Going to primary, we found 43,567 schools. The majority of them, 31,000, belong to private schools, and 12,557 public schools. The learners were 9,111,314 learners, and the females were slightly more by 50,000. Pupil teacher ratio in primary school is 34 pupils to one learner, to one teacher, and the government schools had 48 pupils to one teacher, and this is below the recommended UNESCO ratio of 40 to one teacher. We found that primary schools have lower pupil to teacher ratio of 24, which is far lower. If they can recruit more, it would absorb more learners at that level. Then the most important finding again is that government has a policy that every parish should have a primary school, the government primary school. And we found 3,887 out of 10,860 parishes having no government primary school. This is 28% of the parishes lacking government primary school. But I think private sector is bridging the gap, because we found, when we include private sector, we found only 1,373 primary school out of 10,860 with no primary school at all, which is 0.6. And so there is a gap in service delivery. For secondary schools, again, we found 5,498 schools, 4,000 of which are from private, and 1,500 are from public. Learners, 2,088,133. Female, carrying 1,069,000, and the rest being males. The student-teacher ratio is 40 to 1, which is below the recommended of 30 to 1. And in government, in private, again, it is higher. Government and private are at parity in pupil-teacher ratio. And of course, classroom blocks, we didn't measure the sizes, but still we saw that there is congestion in secondary schools. We found that there are sub-counties or town councils with no government secondary school, and this constitutes 45.5%. So there is a need here. 1,700 out of 2,209 sub-counties or and town councils have no government primary secondary school. And generally overall, 1,208 out of 2,209 town councils have no secondary school at all. So for non-tertiary, these are the people who take primary levels and O levels. We found 74,000 learners in 830. We recommend that learners be given a name, all of them, for even the tracking, so that we can be able to see those who are in primary, where are they during their age of secondary, and those who graduate, where do they go. We also recommend that all schools, we found that some schools had two IMIS numbers for reasons we didn't understand, and others didn't have at all. So we recommend that all schools be given one NIN, one IMIS, so that there is no duplication. We found that there are some pre-primary classes operating in government primary schools that are not formally recognized. They hide them as lower as P1, and this should be mainstreamed to account for them and also accurate planning. We've given other raft of recommendations which are in the report, and we thank the public for receiving this report and you media. Please go and propagate and ensure government provides these missing schools in these schools in where they are missing in primary, in the parishes, and those sub-counties that don't have schools at all. What is interesting is that there are some parishes that have more than one government primary school, which are overserved, and other parishes are underserved. So I think those which do not have should be considered in this Sanga, no sleep.
I've been needing it yesterday, and we cannot say how much we are excited to have it today. So we are really very grateful. It's definitely going to help us and help government as we plan for the provision of education services and the targeting of the most needing areas in our country. The government is committed to the whole of government approach, and so having UBOS undertake the basic data collection is just part and parcel of what government is now doing. We are committed as a country to see ourselves as Ugandans. And although we have different assignments, we should look at them as just pieces of one whole. Because as a nation, we have only one vision. And that's the vision of transformation from where we were 16 years ago, the peasantry setting, to a modern and prosperous Uganda. We only have 13 and a half years to realize our vision by 2040. And you cannot do that unless you effectively plan and execute. And you can't plan and execute unless you have real data and you have it in good time. So we are grateful that together we can now move and see where the services are needed most. I'm hoping that in the report, in the detailed report, that we can be able to pick the relationship between population in terms of residents versus the number of learners. As you mentioned, Buganda kept coming, but it would be great for us to know this, which is called Uganda, how many Ugandans are actually there. That will help us to know that nobody is intentionally marginalized, but it's because the provisions are provided for the people that are there. And also the number of schools together with the population, it will help us to get a whole picture, but I'm sure that it's in the detailed report. It was interesting to note as I sat here that although at secondary level, the government or public schools, as you'd want to call them, although they form only 27% of the schools that were visited, because the schools that were visited were 5,000 something, and then the government schools are only 1,200 something, according to the report. It was interesting to know then that although they are only 27% and the private are 75% in terms of number of schools, in terms of population of the learners, the government schools have 45% of the total. To me, that was a very interesting statistic, showing that government is doing a lot. They don't yet have enough schools, but they have a lot of accommodation in terms of access for the students who access the government schools. I was also intrigued to think that I think in the main report, I'll find it, because it was a bit disheartening to see that the A levels, those who do A levels, are quite few compared to those who sit P7 and those who sit O levels. I think the slide that was shown here, the O levels were almost 4,000, were 3,000, almost 300 and almost 400,000. I think it was 380 something a thousand. But those who did A level were just over 100,000. And looking at figures as are, one would imagine that all those who did transit to A level actually fell out of the system. So I would be interested to know what we called higher education or tertiary institutions. I would be glad to know how many of those are certificate awarding. Because when we finish our O level, as we stand now, some students go in the straight academic line of A level, but others choose the skills areas and join other institutions. So it would be interesting to know how many is a combination of those who did A level and those who are doing certificates after O level, and therefore how many fell out of the system at that point.
Distinguished guests, the Baseline Education Census also directly supports Uganda's commitment to the international agenda. You know, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030. We have also Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Especially, and especially for this case, SDG number 4, goal number 4, on quality education, which seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all the children, all the learners in this country. However, education is also a catalyst for achievement of many other, by the way, SDGs. A well-educated population contributes towards, for example, I usually talk about SDGs because Uganda subscribes to international community, and we must show the world that yes, now we have the data to measure these indicators, and hence tell the whole world where we stand. For example, SDG number 1 on ending poverty, SDG number 5 on gender equality, and SDG number 8 on decent work and economic growth. We have SDG number 9 on innovation and industrialization, and SDG 10 on reducing inequalities, and the data provides that. So the census findings therefore provide a stronger foundation for accelerating localization and implementation of the SDGs within Uganda's National Development Framework. The availability of disaggregated education data will enable government to better target vulnerable regions and populations, including girls, children with disabilities, and underserved communities. So according to the National Population and Housing Census 2024, Uganda's population now stands at approximately 45.9 million people, with over 70% being below the age of 30. So this makes Uganda one of the youngest populations in the world. So this useful population presents both a challenge and a tremendous opportunity that requires sustained investment in quality education, skilling, and innovation. Further, the national literacy rate for persons aged 10 years and above now stands at approximately, I think we are almost 74%, reflecting steady progress arising from government's continued investment in universal education, school infrastructure, teacher recruitment, and community sensitization. So in today's rapidly changing global economy, driven by science, technology, and innovation, the education sector must produce graduates who are digitally skilled, innovative, and adaptable. Government's continued investment in ICT infrastructure, digital transformation, and science education provides enormous opportunities for e-learning, innovation, research, and technology-driven skills development among Uganda's younger population. Nevertheless, the report also reminds us that challenges still exist. We must continue investing in education infrastructure, teacher welfare, digital learning, science and innovation, and school retention, particularly for girls and vulnerable children. So we must also strengthen the linkage between education and labor market demands to address the challenges of graduate unemployment and skills mismatch.